In this video, we're just going to look at using these things called bezier curves in Blender. Now, you may have heard of bezier curves before from working in Illustrator. That's basically the way that we make the shapes and forms in Illustrator using points and curves together to create a shape. And that's essentially what we can do in Blender, but working in 3 dimensions rather than 2 dimensions. It's a pretty inexact tool, but I'll just take you through and show you how to use it, and then how you can convert your bezier curves into a mesh shape and use the other 3D creation tools with it. So it's a way of kind of making more organic shapes rather than geometric shapes in Blender. So I've got this blank workspace at the moment, and I'm in my object mode, and all I'm going to do is go add, and instead of mesh, which is what we're used to with these simple primitives, I'm going to go to curve, and I've got a few curve options here, and the first one is bezier, which constructs a thing called a bezier curve. So I'll just click on that, and you'll notice it's just appeared there in my workspace, and if I go around it, you'll see it's got kind of like a half a little teardrop here, and that kind of represents 2 points on the bezier curve. I'm actually going to go over to my view mode and just click on Z so we can look at it from the top down, and I'm just going to click into edit mode so we can see better how it works. So basically, like Illustrator, we have our anchor point and we have our anchors, which we can click on and modify to move. So I'm just going to modify that a little bit. If you're unable to select or move the object, just make sure your selector is not in select box but in tweak, and that will let us click and move an object. And I can click and drag it and rotate it from the anchor. Now, once you have a point selected, you can add to that point by hitting E, which is extrude, and that will create a new bezier curve from that point. And I've kind of got no plan in mind, I'm just kind of modeling around. So remember, select on the final origin point, hit E, and that will allow you to move the point and click down and position and modify with the select arrow. And then finally, I'm going to try and merge the points together. This is where it gets a little bit tricky though with Blender, because we're working in 3 dimensions. Sometimes things don't kind of line up, but because I was drawing in my Z-axis, everything's kind of flat, which is kind of good, but I'm not quite sure these two are joining up, but that's okay. I can use the vertex tools and the edge tools once I've converted this to a mesh. So here I've got my object, it's kind of sitting there, it's kind of nothing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my object mode, and what I need to do now is I need to convert it to a mesh, and once I convert it to a mesh, then I can start to play with all the properties which we use in meshes, which are the edges, the faces, and the vertexes. So in order to do that, I just need to go to Object, make sure I've got my object selected, and click on Convert To. And what we're going to do is, second one down, we're going to create a mesh from a curve, emitter, surface, or text, and just click on that. Now you won't actually see any kind of change made to it until we go to the Edit mode. And if I go to Edit mode, you'll notice now that instead of having the anchor points which I can manipulate to say change the curve, all I've got now here is all the individual, just make sure I click on my selection mode or my move mode, all the individual points which I can work with. Just make sure I'm in the right tool, so I can just select the objects. And really what I want to do is I'm going to create a new edge, so I'm just going to select these 2 points by holding down the shift button, and if I click F, that will create a face, and that will give me my object to work with. Now at the moment there's no face on it, it's just some edges and some vertexes. So if I want to build a face, there's a couple of things I can do. I can make one large face which contains the whole object, and I can do that just by selecting all the points. I just hit A on the keyboard, and then if I hit F, that will create a face, which I can then go and modify and change, so kind of a more organic shape. But if I want to be a little bit more creative with the way that I create the face here, I can kind of insert loop cuts in by selecting a number of points and then expanding them. And I'll just show you how to do that. It's pretty easy. Knowing the way my videos have been going in the last couple of times I've done them, something will go wrong, but that's quite good. It's always good to see something go wrong to figure out what to make right. And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a number of vertexes which I want to make a new edge and then a new face with. So I can produce, I guess, the equivalent of loop cuts across here. And the loop cuts will essentially go where I have these points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this first point and I'm going to grab the other maybe 5 around here, and I'm just going to click the F key, and you'll see that it's created a face there. And again, just click on the object and hit the F key again and again and again, and it's going to create faces all the way across until it closes up the object there. And so instead of having one large face to work with or manipulate, I've essentially used the selection here to select a number of objects, and now, of course, because they're all separate cuts or loop cuts, I can start to modify and change them all uniquely within the object. So bezier curves are really, really useful for making round corners, of course. They take a little bit more practice than working with the default tools, but as you get more and more used to the creation tools in Blender, you'll be able to start to think about how you might use them for your model. So they're quite fun to have a work with. Again, I'll reiterate, I'm going to go back to my object mode and I'm just going to go through the process again. So I'll just move this out of the way. I'll go through quickly this time. Remember, the objects going to appear where you have the 3D cursor. So add, curve, bezier. We'll create the bezier. I'm just going to go to my Z mode, which is a top-down mode. Click on edit mode, where I can see the object elements. Make sure I'm on tweak, so I can select on the points. So you can click and drag them, and click and drag and modify them. If you want to extend them further, you need to select the point and hit E, and that will select and extend that point. Again, select the point, hit E, and I'm just going to try and join them up. And there's my object. So I've created an object here inside the edit mode. And in order to make it into a mesh, I need to go back to object mode. And I need to go to object, convert to mesh. Now it's now a mesh. Go back to edit mode. And if I click on the vertexes, you can see all the individual vertexes. If I select the whole object with the A key, I can then just add a face to it with F. Remember, F will add a face to the properties of it. If I wanted more segments or loop cuts throughout it, I can go to my vertex mode and just select the number of vertexes I want the edge to be made out of, and then just hit F to make that. So just have a little bit of practice of it to see how it works, and that's basically how you work with bezier curves in Blender.